What if selling didn't feel like selling at all? Nikki Rausch, founder of Sales Maven, has spent over 25 years transforming the way entrepreneurs and business owners approach sales. Her journey began in the corporate world where she shattered sales records with clients like NASA, Hewlett Packard, and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. But it was her deep dive into neurolinguistic programming that revolutionized her understanding of communication and influence. Today, Nikki is a sought after sales coach, speaker, and author of 3 books, including The Selling Staircase, Mastering the Art of Relationship Selling. Her signature framework guides clients through a 5-step process that emphasizes connection over coercion, making sales conversations feel natural and authentic. Through her Sales Maven Society, Nikki empowers entrepreneurs to embrace their values and close deals with confidence. She believes that selling is not about pushing products, but about building relationships and understanding client needs. This is a conversation about redefining sales, not a transaction, but as a meaningful exchange rooted in trust and authenticity. And before we hop into the podcast, a quick word from our sponsor, Deep Wealth and the Deep Wealth Mastery Program. We have William, a graduate of Deep Wealth Mastery, and he says, I didn't have the time for Deep Wealth Mastery, but I made the time and I'm glad I did. What I learned goes far beyond any other executive program or coach I've ever experienced. Or how about Bruce? Bruce says, before Deep Wealth Mastery, the challenge I had with most business programs, coaches, or books was that they were one-dimensional. Through Deep Wealth Mastery, I'm part of a richer community of other successful business owners. The ideas shared forever changed the trajectory of the business, and best of all, the experience was fun. And we'll round things out with Stacy. Stacy said, I wish I had access to the Deep Wealth Mastery before my liquidity event, as it would have been extremely helpful. Deep Wealth Mastery exceeded my expectations in terms of content and quality. And you know what, my Deep Wealth Nation, why they're saying this is because Deep Wealth Mastery, it's the only system based on a 9-figure deal. That was my deal. And as you know, I said no to a 7-figure offer, and I created a system that we now call Deep Wealth Mastery that helped myself and my business partners welcome from a different buyer, a different offer, a 9-figure exit. So if you're interested in growing your profits, preparing for a future liquidity event, if that's 2 years away or 20 years away, and you want to optimize your post-exit life, Deep Wealth Mastery is for you. Please email success@deepwealth.com. Again, that's success, SUCCESS @deepwealth.com. We'll send you all the information about Deep Wealth Mastery, otherwise known as Scale for Ultimate Sale. That's where you want to be. You want to be with other successful business owners, entrepreneurs, and founders just like you who are looking to create market disruptions, and they want to lock in their financial freedom and have success and fulfillment. That's the 90-day Deep Wealth Mastery Program. It has your name on it. All you need to do is take the next step. Send an email to success@deepwealth.com. Deep Wealth Nation, welcome to another episode of the Deep Wealth Podcast. Okay, all you founders, entrepreneurs, business owners out there, here's a question for you. It's a rhetorical one. Would you like to increase your profits? You want to grow your company, but you want to do so effortlessly and not in that sleazy sales way that no one feels comfortable with. But I'll use the F word, having some fun along the way doing that, and some strategies that you never knew you had that are right there in front of you. Of course, you said yes. And that's what we're focusing on today. I have a fellow podcaster, a thought leader, an author, an entrepreneur. So, Nikki, welcome to the Deep Wealth Podcast. An absolute pleasure to have you with us. There's always a story behind the story. And Nikki, I know you've got a great story. So what's your story? What got you from where you were to where you are today?
Thank you for having me first and foremost. And what got me from where I was to where I am today? Realistically, I have a pretty extensive background in sales. That was my career for many years, and I had a lot of success there. In addition to that, I started studying neurolinguistic programming. And if that's a new term for a listener, it's really the study of communication. So the way we process information in our brains, that's the neuro piece. Linguistics is language. The programming part of it is about habits and patterns. And I started studying it because I thought, oh, it'll improve my selling skills. And it certainly did. And it just made me a better communicator, which the better you are at communication, the easier you find being in conversation with people. So it started to improve a lot of relationships in my life. So had a lot of success in my sales career using my NLP to really define who I was as the sales rep managing a large territory, and started to wonder, is this it? Is there anything else out there for me? Is this going to be what I'm doing until the end of my career? That got me very curious. And I ended up leaving the industry that I had really built a successful career in. And that was the first time I started networking with women in particular. I came from a very male dominated industry. I started hanging out with these super cool entrepreneurial women, and I found that a lot of them were struggling to make money in their business. And if you don't make money in your business, you have a hobby, you don't have a business. And the piece that they often struggled with was the sales piece of business, and not just sales, but the conversation of sales. That was something I knew how to do. And I just wanted to hang out with these cool entrepreneurial women. So I just started offering sales advice when they wanted it, offering them some strategy and some language. And finally, somebody pulled me aside and said, like, why are you not doing this as a business? And I thought, well, that seems dumb. Who would pay me for this? It's so easy. But turns out here I am coming up on my 12th year in business, and people pay me to learn how to be more strategic in their sales conversations so that they build stronger relationships and that they're able to connect with people in a deep, meaningful way. So it doesn't come across salesy and gross and manipulative. It's actually conversational and it's much more effective. So that's how I got to where I am today.
Oh my goodness, love that story. So much there to unpack. Before we get going, Deep Wealth Nation, please go to the show notes because in the show notes, there will be a link. I want you to pick up Nikki's book, The Selling Staircase, Mastering the Art of Relationship Selling. And I love how you're all about relationship selling. And so let me take a step back though, because you've been in the corporate world, now in the entrepreneurial world. And I know as small business owners, entrepreneurs that look to the corporate world, okay, wow, they've got all the money, the resources, the tools, and in many ways they do. But I'm wondering, having been on both sides of the table, what works well in the corporate world that we can take into our world? And then what should we just not even be envious of or not even want to emulate because, hey, maybe that works for the corporate or maybe it doesn't even work for the corporates. They think it does, but it's actually wrong. What would you say to that?
Well, one thing I would say is I think sometimes there's this misconception that when you're selling to a corporation that you have to change your style. And I don't think that's actually true because you're still selling to a person. You're still having a conversation with a person. And yes, their business card might have a really prestigious title and it might have a really prestigious company name on it, but you're still selling to a person. And so you have to relate to that person, finding out what's important to them. What problem are they looking to solve? And do you have a solution for that? Now, there's a little bit more red tape on the corporate side, right? That there's more steps to get to the decision making, where I think in the entrepreneurial world, we have an advantage in that most of us run our own business. So we can make the decide, we're the decider. Yes, I'd like to move forward with this, or no, this isn't for my company at this time. Whereas with corporate, you've got to go get it approved by the boss, maybe purchasing, maybe there's a committee involved. So it's understanding what's the process for making a decision that is important at any level. So again, back to your question, at corporate, you've got a lot of process. You have a lot of prestige, a lot of times that's attached to what company you're working for. And so that gives you some buying power. In the entrepreneurial world, you're nimble. You can be flexible. You can move. You can make decisions faster. So I think there's advantages to both.
Well, absolutely. And let me ask you this. In some ways, it's almost too general, too vague of a question. I'm going to ask it anyways. If we go really at high level, and I would completely agree with you. You said, Jeffrey, the question that you asked me, it's really dependent because every company, every individual, they have their own path. They're in their own particular place and one's not the same as the other. And I would say, yeah, I agree with that. That said, though, generally speaking, are there certain patterns that you're looking at? And let's be perhaps glass half full because as entrepreneurs, oh yeah, I'm going to figure it out. I'm going to do it. And the glass it's not half empty. It's half full. I'm going to do it. But on the flip side, when the glass is half empty, what would be some of the same patterns or what some people call mistakes? I call them opportunities that we keep on making again and again that is holding us back, or the good old 80-20 rule or Pareto's law. Yeah, Jeffrey, you know what? 20% of these same actions, inactions, or issues are creating 80% of these problems or future opportunities for most companies. What would you say that would be?
Well, you tell me if I'm answering your question, but what comes to mind here is that the mistakes I think that often happen when it comes to selling in particular, because that's really my expertise, is that people think sales is something you do to another person. And that's where it feels gross and manipulative. But sales actually is something you do with another person. It should be conversational. I believe that you need to understand, am I talking to somebody who has a need? That's the first thing. The second thing is, do I have a solution that meets that need? And then the third thing is, do I have permission? And this is really critical. Do I have permission to put an offer in front of them? And where most people fall down is they don't have permission. So they go in with this hard sell, or they go in with this idea of, I have to convince these people to buy my thing, whatever I'm selling. And that's my job. But that puts you at a really disadvantage. Like I always say, that creates an imbalance of power in any kind of relationship or dynamic. When you feel like your job is to convince somebody of something, you've already lost. Because in our society today, most people don't want to be convinced of things. And when you go into convince mode, they shut down. They go, no, I don't want you to change my mind. I don't want you to tell me why I'm wrong. I don't want you to tell me what I should do and what you want. That's not important to me. So when you go in with this idea of, it's actually my job to earn the business, but first I need to understand, do they have a need? Do I have a solution? And more importantly, do I have permission to put it in front of them? Once those three things are in place, selling gets easier. It gets so much easier. Now, the other kind of piece that I would add to that, which I think is a misconception, is people think, oh, you're either a natural born salesperson or you're not. That is complete baloney, because every skill can be learned and selling is a skill. And so I truly believe everybody can learn to be successful at sales. Now, do I think you need to sell like me, or do I think I need to sell like you? No. But I need to understand the structure and the strategy behind it. And once I understand that, just like anything in corporate or anything in any business, when you have a system and a structure in place, everything gets better. When you're just flying by the seat of your pants and going, well, we'll see how it goes, it's probably not going to go well. But when you have a structure, a system in place, things get easier. Not just for you too, by the way, for the buyer.
Absolutely. And I know people often laugh when I share this with them, whether it's $1 billion, so a billion with a B, or $100 or $1,000, even $5 or $10, that buying process, that selling process, we're all people, and we're all coming from the same place, and we're all going through the same kinds of emotions, maybe just different zeros that are going to be in front of whatever we're purchasing. So that said, you mentioned it at the beginning, it'd be very easy to gloss over neurolinguistic programming, NLP. What is that? What's going on there? Some of our listeners in Deep Wealth Nation, NLP, what does it sound like? It sounds complicated, or it sounds gimmicky, or you're trying to manipulate me. So what's going on with NLP? And I'm going to tag on a second part to that, because I know in your system, in fact, it's actually step 2 in the book, creating curiosity, which I couldn't agree with more. We're not convincing people. Let them be curious, come there on their own conclusion and ways. So how are you using NLP in the selling process?
Well, first, NLP is the study of communication. It's paying attention. So I mentioned that paying attention to the way people are processing information. They give you clues. We walk around basically with billboards around, like all around us, in the way that we show up, the way that we speak, the words that we choose, our body language, all of these things are sending signals. And if you know how to pay attention to them, what you really are looking to do is not be manipulative. It's looking to add flexibility to your behavior to put the other person at ease. So my all-time favorite quote is, "Blessed are the flexible, for they shall not be bent out of shape." And the thing about NLP is it teaches you how to pay attention to somebody else's style, their cues, and then adjust your style to make it more comfortable for them to be in conversation with you. And when you're willing to adjust to another person, they oftentimes will start to adjust to you, because it has to do with synchronization. We find it's easier to be in sync with somebody than it is to be out of sync. And an example of this is, imagine that you meet somebody for the first time and you just instantly feel that connection. And you have like an hour-long conversation, but it only feels like it was like 10 minutes. It was so easy. It was so comfortable. And it was like, man, this just felt good. And you think to yourself, like, I don't know where this person's been all my life, but I feel like we should have been friends all along. Like, just so in sync with that person. Now, the flip side of this, you meet somebody, you be in conversation with them for 10 minutes and you feel like it feels 2 days and I need a nap. It was so exhausting. Now, oftentimes that's because that person has a very different style than you, and it takes more effort and energy for you to be in conversation with that person when they have a different style. Bringing NLP into it, when you're able to adjust to the other person to make it more comfortable for them, they will be more open to staying in conversation with you. They'll be more open to hearing what it is that you have to share, and they'll be more revealing about what's important to them. All of these things set you up for success in sales. Now, again, if the person doesn't have a need, if you don't have permission to put it in front of them, you're not going to earn their business. But when you are willing to adjust to the other person, when you're willing to show that I'm not just going to be the person who shows up in a conversation and says, hey, everybody, stop what you're doing and pay attention to me because I'm the most important person in the room and I have something important to say. Everybody's going to be like, go kick rocks. No thanks. But if you show up in the room and you go, hey, what's important to you? How can I be of service? How can I be a resource to you? Now people are like, oh, you care about me? You're interested in, and you're paying attention and you're listening and you're asking really smart questions. Now people are more engaged. Now they're willing to be more revealing. Now they're more willing to be open. So how I bring NLP into the sales is I teach my clients how to have more flexibility, how to ask better questions, how to be a better listener, how to use the information that the person is giving and deliver it back to them in a way that is very palatable for them to go, oh, yeah, this person speaks my language. They're paying attention to me. They get me. And now I'm interested in maybe giving them my business versus the person who's, hey, this is what we sell. You should buy it. And they're like, no, thanks.
Absolutely love that story. And in fact, I've shared this on the podcast before, Nikki, where one of my favorite books for this kind of area, it's a classic, Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People. And what always stood out, I read that when I was a teenager. All these years later, I still remember that one story he shares. He was at, I believe it was a dinner party and didn't really know anybody. And he was sitting next to this individual, happened to be a woman that he was speaking to. And he said a few words, just asked a few questions, and it was a prolonged conversation. And she walked away, exactly to your point. She walked away saying, wow, that's one of the best conversations I ever had. And in the book, he said, I barely said anything, but it reminds me of what a sales mentor of mine said very early on. Jeffrey, we've been given 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. Listen, don't talk, just listen. And so for those who like to talk, they like to spout away at the mouth, particularly in a sales situation, why are they just losing it? Why should they stop doing that? As hard as this might be for them to hear, what would you tell them of why we want to have some silence and just thoughtful listening and very active questioning and just being curious?
Well, there's a few things that are going on. You know, when you're talking, you already know everything you're going to say. So what will happen is you'll start to delete information because you already know what you mean. And for the other person that's hearing it for the first time, it may just sound like mumble jumble. Like they're like, I don't even know what this person's talking about because they don't know what you're deleting because they don't know what you know. And so when you're just talking and you're not getting any kind of cues or feedback from the other person, it's probably just like noise to them. And we're surrounded by noise right now. So instead, if you'll give some information and then pause and let the other person process it, because they're just hearing it for the first time, they need time to digest a little bit about what you're saying. And they need time to formulate a response or a question or a thought. And you're just talking, you're basically like talking all over their thinking. And it's kind of rude. You're just like, I always call this, it's like word vomiting on somebody. Nobody wants to be word vomited on. Like, no, thank you. Like, ugh. So you have to be willing to have conversation, and conversation isn't talking at somebody, it's talking with. And that means there has to be pauses. There has to be silence. There has to be a space for the other person to respond, to engage, because nobody just wants to be talked at. We get talked at all day long, all over social media, all over the news, all over everywhere we show up. People just want to talk at us. And that's why this woman from the book, the story that you're talking about, can walk away and go, that's one of the best conversations I've had, probably because she had space to talk. And that's so rare in our current society and the way we think we're supposed to be in conversation with people.
And so, speaking of books, from one classic book to another, your book, The Selling Staircase. So, talk us through your system, because I know you have the 5-step staircase. That's your method, your strategies for really making a difference out there of how we're going to maximize results. Again, in your words, we're not pushing it on people, having them genuinely interested and curious. So, can you walk us through your method to this brilliance that you've been creating out there and how it works and some of the why it works behind that?
Yeah, so thank you for that. So, the selling staircase is my 5 step framework for a successful sales conversation. And the reason I teach it as a staircase is because most of us understand that you ascend a staircase 1 step at a time. You don't stand at the bottom and hop up to the top step. Not only that, but you don't go to somebody that you just met for the first time and say, "Hey, from a standing position, why don't you hop up to the 5th step up there?" That person's going to look at you like, "Are you crazy? I'm not going to do that. I might bang my shins. It's going to be uncomfortable. Who knows if I'll stick the landing?" All these things go into their heads. But yet, a lot of times in sales, we show up, we immediately go into like sales mode with somebody, and that's skipping steps. So I teach this as a 5 step process so that you can break it down as the seller and go, what step am I on? What step is the client on? And what do I do or say next to invite them to this next step? And now it takes the pressure off you. It takes the pressure off the potential buyer because they don't know what's supposed to happen. So that's the selling staircase. The 5 steps of them. Step 1 is what I call introduction. And the objective there is to make a powerful, positive first impression because people are making judgments about you when they first meet you. And if you don't take that time to make a positive first impression, it's so hard to change, to get that second impression, right? Like to change somebody's mind once they've started to formulate an opinion about you. And these opinions happen very quickly. And they say in the first 10 seconds, people can make up to 10 judgments of you. And in the first 2 minutes, they've already pretty much decided how do they feel about you and are you trustworthy? So, what are you doing in those first 2 minutes to really set yourself and them up for success? And oftentimes, when I talk to business owners and I ask them, like, what is it like to be in conversation with you when somebody's first meeting you? And they think, I've never asked myself that question. Well, you should, because it might change the way you show up in conversation. So that's step 1, make a powerful first impression. Step 2, you mentioned here, which is create curiosity. This is the most missed step. If you aren't able to create curiosity about who you are, what you do, what you offer, most people, they don't know. And so there's no way for them to want to further a conversation. It just stops right there because your job is to create curiosity, to see, am I talking to somebody who maybe would be interested in what I offer? So can I pique their curiosity? Now, when you pique somebody's curiosity, if they are a potential buyer for you, what comes with curiosity is they start to give you what I call buying signals. Now, The Selling Staircase is my 3rd book. My 2nd book is just about buying signals because they're so crucial to picking up. And buying signals are verbal and nonverbal cues that people give that indicate interest. When you get a buying signal, it makes sense then to propel the person to the next step in the selling staircase, which step 3 for me is what I call discovery. Now, some people call it their consult call. Some people call it the sales call. I don't care what you call it. I care what you do in it. And what you want to do in your discovery call is ask smart questions that plants the seeds in the mind of the potential buyer that, oh my gosh, what Jeffrey is talking about resonates with me. He's asking me questions that I maybe don't know the answers to, but I probably should. So now I've got an interest in hearing how can he help me? How can he get me these answers? So when you do a well done discovery by asking really smart questions, now it leads to step 4, which is proposal. This is actually where the selling happens. This is where you're laying out your potential offer, and you've gotten permission to do that from this person. So you're putting an offer in front of them. And then step 5, which is the second most missed step, by the way, is the close. And most people get maybe to step 4 in a sales conversation with somebody, and then they forget to close, or they're nervous, or they're not sure how to close. But when I say close, that doesn't necessarily mean, hey, sign on the dotted line, give me money. It means you have to get close language out of your mouth so that the other person can now either make a decision, ask a question, voice an objection, say no, or something else. But if you never get to that part of the conversation, you can't earn somebody's business. So those are the 5 steps. And when you can walk yourself through it and go, I know what step I'm on with this client. I know where we are. How do I move them to the next step? You issue invitations every step of the way. They don't know what they're supposed to do. It's your job to earn the business. So your job is to guide the conversation. And I find that like giving people this 5-step process, it gives them that like empowerment that it's not about having the perfect word or the perfect phrase or having some kind of story that's going to make this person go, yes, yes, here's all my money. It allows for you to show up and be your authentic, genuine self and be strategic.
And Nikki, it's no accident that the close, step 5, is step 5 and it's not step 1. How many times, and we've all been there, we really want to buy something, whatever it may be, and we walk in or we call in or happen to be on the website or on a webinar or a Zoom call, and right away we're being sold to. We're not even asked, okay, well, why are you here? What's keeping you up at night? What's going on? Well, let me tell you, Jeffrey, about our system, and there's 1,000 things I want you to know. Eyes glaze over, we're getting bored. And so to your point, hey, let's get curious really on both sides. Jeffrey, what's keeping you up at night? What are some of your problems? Maybe your solution, Nikki, and you can tell me, Jeffrey, on base or off base, maybe your solution has 100 different benefits. I really only need 1 or 2. So you're going to ignore the 98. You're only going to focus on the 1 or 2 because that's really what I'm looking for. Have me get curious about that, create some rapport, maybe some storytelling of how it can help along the way. And I would say naturally, at least in my experience, naturally when that's done, we're helping each other out and there's no pressure here. And as a customer, yeah, I want to get this help. When do I begin? What's this going to cost? When can we get started? That's the outcome of that. But walk us through that of where we're at with that and maybe some of the more common mistakes that you tend to see out there.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, a lot of people go right into sales mode or they go into this mode, which is like educate mode. Like, I need to educate them. I need to tell them all the things. But, you know, you're an expert at what you do. You're an expert in your field and you know so much. The person that is potentially going to buy from you, they're not looking to be an expert. They're looking to hire an expert or buy from an expert. They don't need to know all, they don't need to know every single thing about your product. You laid it out so beautifully, this idea of what is most important to them, and then focus on that. That was actually one of the best compliments I ever received. As a traveling sales rep, I used to go out and support other salespeople in the field. I would do demonstrations for them and help them close deals at the manufacturer level. And one of the things that my reps used to always say is, Nikki, you never give the same presentation twice. And I consider that to be the highest compliment because the presentation that I was giving was specific to the person who was sitting in the room with me. It's not about me. I don't have a button on my back that just says play that you press and then I word vomit my same old presentation, blah, 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 same to somebody because that's not necessarily interesting to them. So instead, I would do what you're saying here is spend time, ask questions, find out what is the struggle? What is keeping this person up at night? What are they looking to solve? And then when I'm talking about my product, it's still the same product. I'm not creating some new product for them. The product is the product, but the benefits that I highlight are specific to that person. So just because you think something's important and you think they're going to think it's cool, that is irrelevant. It's not about you. It's about them. And when you can tailor your answers and your presentation to something that is, it's like you're speaking my language. I always say, if you travel, if you're somebody who likes to travel outside of your country and you go to another country where their language is a different language than you, and you show up and you be like me, and I go, well, I speak English. So I would appreciate if everybody here in this country would speak English to me. People go like, ooh, ugly American, gross. You're in our country, lady. Speak our language or at least try. And so when you show up in a sales conversation, you're like, I'm just going to tell you what I think is important. You're being the ugly American. I'm just speaking English. Like, you should know my language. No, they shouldn't. You should be willing to adjust to them. You're in their country, you're in their situation. So adjust to them. And you'll find that people will go, this is the best presentation we've ever had. Or, gosh, I feel like you're just speaking right to me. Yeah, because I am. I'm tailoring my presentation, I'm tailoring my answers to what's important to you. Now, the only way I can get that information is by asking you questions, by listening, by picking up those cues.
And so with that said, and I don't want to overcomplicate things, and there really is a natural ebb and flow when you're doing all this. So once we've got that down, we can use resources and tools to really help us take that to the next level. Again, naturally and effortlessly. So we circled back to neurolinguistic programming just before. Let's go back to that now. So once we have the 5 steps down, and again, Depop Nation, go to the show notes, please. Go to the show notes, pick up the book, pick up all the books, actually. Pick up the books, go through it. But once we've got the system down, what can we be doing from an NLP side that's really going to help us take our education process, otherwise known as sales, to the next level?
Well, one of the things on NLP, I'll just give you just one example is I've mentioned this now a few times of like adjusting to the other person and adjusting to their style. And one of the ways that you can do this in a live conversation with somebody, are you willing to adjust something as simple as your rate of speech? This is very NLP, by the way. And you think about a rate of speech, think about on a spectrum, right? Somebody who is a really fast talker, maybe they're up in like the 8, the 9, the 10, right? Like they've got a lot to say. Sometimes they don't even take breaths between sentences and they're fast thinkers, they're fast talkers. Now, if you want to earn the business of somebody who is a really fast talker, that's their kind of normal go-to mode. And you are somebody who really takes your time. You have thoughts, you think about them, and then you say, all the fast talkers that are listening to your podcast right now are like, put Nikki on fast, speed her up. She is too slow because it's a mismatch, right? So if you're working with somebody who has a very different rate of speech than you, and you're willing to make some adjustments, and you don't have to adjust 100% because we're not mimicking them, right? If they have a Southern accent and you don't want to start talking in a Southern accent because that's kind of inauthentic, right? But if they have a slower rate of speech and let's say they're on a 3 on the spectrum and you're at an 8, you don't have to adjust 100%. But if you would slow down to a 5 even, you just start taking your time a little bit more. And then what will happen is they'll start to speed up. You guys will find a happy medium. It'll be easier to be in conversation. Now, here's why this is so crucial. And again, so NLP is when we meet people who are like us, we like those people. I mentioned this earlier about being in conversation with certain people. Sometimes it feels, time just flew. Other times it's, I need a nap, right? Now, not only do we like people who have a similar style than us, but we also make the assumption that somebody who is like us is smart. Be honest, Jeffrey, when you meet somebody and you think, this person has got it going on. We think alike. We have a lot in common. You think that person's smart because you know you're smart.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, please continue.
Yeah. So adjust to the other person, and you'll find that they'll be like, oh, this is just easier to be in conversation. So when you've gone through the 5 steps and you're adjusting the whole time to the other person, when you're slowing down a little bit on your rate of speech, or maybe you're speeding up a little bit to put them at ease, now you'll find again, once you get to the close, they will be more revealing if their answer is no. Because don't you sometimes, when you get a no, want to know why you get a no? Because wouldn't that be helpful if you understand why somebody's declining working with you? If they feel comfortable in that conversation and they're willing to share, here's my reason for saying no to you, you can take that information and do a better job on the next client. Or maybe there's a chance you could still earn their business. But if you get a no and you have no idea why, and that person doesn't feel comfortable sharing the no with you, how are you going to learn? You're just like, oh, well, this sucks. Sales sucks. I'm not good at sales. Maybe I should quit, right? No, maybe you should just find out what's going wrong and fix it. Or if we're getting to this conversation and the person is, heck yeah, I want to buy. And it's because you made adjustments, you made it comfortable for them to be in conversation. Now you're like, well, it was totally worth it. It was totally worth it to pay attention to this person, to ask them smart questions, to adjust my style, to put them at ease.
And everything that you're saying, Depop Nation, this is not a gimmick. This is not a trick. We are now really putting human nature under the microscope. And Depop Nation, I want you to think, you probably don't even know it, but you're all doing NLP. I want you to think back to a conversation. You were really engaged with the conversation, particularly if you're in person. And chances are, if you're to go back to that conversation, or the next time you're in the middle of a conversation that you're just loving, take a step back. Chances are, Nikki, to your point, my speech cadence, I'm matching the speed of the other person. If the other person has their hands crossed, my hands are probably going to be crossed. We're probably going to be symmetry across from one another. We're mirroring the other people. And I know in Sales 101, we're taught, hey, in an authentic way, get curious, mirror the other person. And Nikki, what's interesting about this, I know there's some people listening saying, yeah, Jeffrey, Nikki, come on, that's a bunch of garbage and that doesn't just work. And I'm a numbers person and it's not on a spreadsheet. It's not reality. It doesn't exist. What's interesting in Deep Wealth Mastery, our 90-day program, we did a very deep dive on the psychology, not just on selling, but just people getting along and specifically on storytelling, which is going to be my next question for you. And what they found in the studies, a really good storyteller who has a great story to tell. The areas of the brain that's lighting up in the storyteller are also lighting up in the audience. And it's just wired in us. We don't even realize that we're doing this. That's why when we're in a movie, if the movie is laughing or crying, we're laughing or crying. Or if it's a scary movie, our heart rate goes up. It's as though we're almost there. Even logically, we know it's just a movie. We know it's not real. Our brain doesn't. It can't tell the difference. So when it comes to stories, what's your take on stories to help enhance the, I'm not even going to call it the selling process, the education process?
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of storytelling. I think it's very critical. I think it's a key skill set that people should all learn, frankly. And the thing about storytelling is we have episodic memory. We want a beginning, a middle, and an end. And that's what's great about story. And from all of my years of storytelling in studying it and practicing it and teaching it, one of the things that I often found interesting, especially when I first started studying storytelling, it was actually with my NLP teacher. She was a master storyteller. And she taught storytelling around teaching fables and parables, right? So these are just fairy tales in a lot of instances. So it's not like real world, but she could be telling a story. And at the end of the story, she wouldn't give any context to it. And she would say, now, for everybody that's listened, who were you in the story? And this used to blow my mind. I used to think, am I in a room full of crazy people? Because people would say things like, I was the rock. And you're like, there was no rock in the story. Or they would say, I was the eagle flying overhead. And there's no eagle. And I used to tell this parable, it's called the naked truth. So I won't go into the full detail, but what was interesting is a lot of times I would give detail about the naked truth and I would talk about how parable would show up, and parable was dressed in these fine silks and just these bright, vibrant colors. And then I would get to the end of the story and I would ask my participants in the room, now, what color was the silk? And people would know, oh, it was purple. Somebody else, no, it wasn't. It was yellow. I never said what color it is. We add details. And that's what's so powerful about our brains and story, is that when you tell a story to somebody, they're not necessarily just listening to the story and going, okay, those are the characters that Nikki mentioned in the story. No, they're going, who am I in the story? They're placing themselves in the story. And this is why it's so powerful. This is in NLP, it's known as future pacing, right? Like we see ourselves in the story, even though we might not have even been included in the story, right? But we go, who am I in the story? How does that story relate to me? And our brains start processing it. Just how you said, you can watch a movie and everybody's laughing and now it makes you want to laugh. That's neurons. Those are mirror neurons in our brain that are firing like crazy. I don't know if you've ever seen that. I think it's like a YouTube video. It's from years ago, but this man gets on a subway and it's just packed with people. And the people, they've got all these video or all these cameras set up. And the people look like it's the end of their day. Like they're exhausted and they're just like, nobody's talking. And they're just like, they've sucked every bit of energy out of them that you've got. And this guy gets on and he starts laughing. And people at first are like, who's this dude? He's just laughing. And he just keeps laughing. And pretty soon the people around him are laughing. And then every single person on the train is laughing. It's so contagious. Then he gets off and people are still laughing. But within a few minutes, everybody stopped laughing and they're back to their normal kind of like, oh, the drudge of the commute. So this, again, this is this example of firing neurons and how important story is, because our brains, we love this stuff. We eat it up. They say that the story is the language of the brain. And I don't know if you've heard this. You've probably heard this phrase before where people say, a picture is worth 1,000 words. That's the saying, right? And they go, picture's worth 1,000 words. And then somebody else actually said, it wasn't me, but somebody else said, a story is worth 1,000 pictures. So it's so much more powerful than just what you think it is because people are making sense of it when they hear your story. So that was a very long answer to your question, Jeffrey, but I love story.
And story, at least for me, and you can share Jeffrey on base, off base, to me, stories, that's hardwired into who we are as humans,
Hmm.
as people. It
Hmm.
goes back eons. I mean, think about it. Before we had the paper, the printing press, books, it was stories as being passed down from one generation to the next generation. So it's hardwired into us. We're naturally attracted to that. And so from stories, from getting to know people, going through the needs analysis, I really appreciated what you had done in step two, actually, going back to step two, creating curiosity. Because so often, and by the way, Deep Wealth Nation, everybody is in sales. It doesn't matter if your title, your job title has sales or not, every single person is in sales. And if you don't believe me, think about the last time you liked a movie or a restaurant, or you had a terrible experience about something. How many people did you tell? When you're telling family and friends, oh, you got to go to this restaurant. I went there. It was so exciting. And they're hearing how excited you are. Well, you're selling. You just didn't realize it. But let me ask you this, Nikki, because you talk about signals, examples of buying signals. And I love how you go into detail with it. We have signals about pricing and if I'm interested, and I'm just giving you cues that too many times we just miss altogether as though they're not even there. So, what would be some of the more common mistakes that we're making? What should we be on the lookout for in a conversation? Hey, this person, I can help them. They're interested. They're asking me to help them, but I'm missing it. So, how do I stop that? What should I be doing?
Yeah. Okay. So with buying signals, I mentioned earlier, they're verbal and nonverbal cues that people give that indicate interest. Now, your job when you get a buying signal is to act on it. And the way you act on it is typically a buying signal will show up usually in the form of a question. That's the most common way that a buying signal will show up. So, what most people do is they answer the question. But actually, what you want to do is you want to answer the question and then follow up with an invitation. So, for example, you mentioned this one about pricing, right? Somebody asks you what your price is. Now, that is a potential buying signal. So, you got to be turned on and tuned in and really paying attention and going like, oh, somebody asked me about pricing. I'm going to give them the answer and then I'm going to follow up with an invitation because there's a reason they're asking. So, my job is to check to see, is this a legit buying signal? So, if somebody says, Nikki, what's your price? I give the answer. Now, the answer might be VIP packages with me range anywhere from $2,000 to $10,000. Now I'm going to follow up with an invitation. Are you interested in finding out which package would be a good fit for you? Then I zip it and I wait and I see what they say next. That's me acting on the buying signal. Now, sometimes buying signals aren't as obvious, right? Like here's one that people often miss is they go, well, will you offer a discount? Kind of sticking with this pricing thing. And people go like, oh, how dare you ask me for a discount? I'm offended. And I go, no, that's a buying signal. Doesn't mean you have to give them a discount, but it does mean that you want to answer their question and then follow up with an invitation. I cannot tell you how many times somebody's asked me for a discount and I say, thank you so much for asking. That program does not offer any kind of a discounts. Now, is that something you'd like to get signed up for? And they go, yes. Okay, that's fine. That's you acting on the buying signal. Now, they might say, Nikki, will you give me a discount? And I might say, thank you for asking. I don't offer discounts on that program.
Yeah.
And they might go, okay, well, see ya. That's fine too. That's a bless and release. I'm okay with that. If, my answer is my answer. But the most important thing is that you answer the question and then you follow up with an invitation. And if you're hearing me talk about this right now and you're thinking like, oh no, I think so and so gave me a buying signal 2 days ago when we were in a conversation, and I don't think I issued the invitation. Go circle back with so and so and now issue an invitation. Say, hey, when we talked 2 days ago, you had mentioned maybe this is something you'd want to kind of find out more about. Should we schedule a time to chat, or is that something you'd like to get signed up for? Just ask the question. Now, I have been in sales for over 25 years and I have asked and invited a lot of people to work with me. And I have been told no once. That's not true. I've been told no so many times, but I've never had anybody clutch their pearls and be like, oh, how dare you ask me for my business, Nikki? No, they'll just say no if they're not interested, or they'll have a question, or they'll say yes. And any of that is okay, but it's my job to earn the business. So here's one that might not seem as obvious, again, to people, is that when somebody gives you a compliment, about who you are and what you do, something around the business. A lot of people go, well, I was raised right. My parents told me when you get a compliment, you say, thank you. But I don't want you to just stop there. I want you to follow up and see, is it a potential buying signal? So here's a real life example. I was one time at a networking event and a woman, I was standing actually having a conversation with a client, and I saw this woman from way across the room. There was like 100 of us in this networking breakfast, and she was making her way like around the tables, and she was like beelining right for us. So I don't know if she's coming to talk to me or talk to my client, but I see her out of my peripheral vision, and I'm kind of watching her come over, and she walks right up to me and she says, "Are you Nikki Rausch?" And I said, "I am," because I am, right? What am I going to say? Yes, I am. And she said, "Oh my gosh, my friend Erin, she went through your training and she just raves about it." Now, you hear it? Like that's a potential buying signal. I don't know, but I'm willing to check. So I say, "Oh my gosh, thank you. I just adore Erin. Now, is there some way I might be a resource to you?" Now, you guys can't see me. Jeffrey can see me on the camera, but I know that your audience can't. So I'm going to describe what happened. She tilted her head and she looked up, like her eyes went up like to the ceiling, and then she tilted her head the other way and her eyes went up to the ceiling again, and she goes, "Maybe." Now I then follow up and say, "Is it something you'd like to schedule a time for us to chat? I'd love to learn more about you and your business." We scheduled a time. Now, she didn't hire me on that first call, but she did give lots of interest, and she said she was going to think about it. And so we scheduled another call, and then some time went by and we had another call, but she wasn't quite ready. And then I saw her again at a networking meeting, and she ended up coming up to me at that point and said, "Nikki, I'm in, I'm ready. Let's go." Great. Took her money, got it scheduled. We worked together. And she heard me tell this story about tilting her head and maybe when she gave me a compliment. And she called me after she heard me tell this story on a training. And she said, "That story's about me, isn't it?" I said, "It is. Do you remember coming up to me at that breakfast?" And she said, "Oh, I remember it so clearly." And I said, "Now, when you came over to introduce yourself, did you come over with the intention of becoming a private coaching client?" And she was like, "No." And I was like, "Well, how did we get here? How did we get to work together?" And she said, "Nikki, you asked." Exactly. That's my point. You have to ask. You have to be willing to issue the invitation so that the other person can process in their brain, is this something I'm interested in? Is this something I'd like to learn more about? Is this something I'd like to buy? That's your job, to get their brain to ask themselves that question, because you can't earn their business otherwise.
And Nikki, it all goes back to what you were speaking about earlier. Hey, get curious, do that discovery. What are some of the painful problems? We can have 1,000 things going right. We're not going to be thinking about that. It's the one thing that isn't going right. That's what we're going to be thinking of. That's what creates the pain. And if you can identify that and you can genuinely help, well, there's a better to good chance that, okay, you now have a new customer. You've identified the pain. You reminded me about that pain, and you've shown me what a bright and prosperous future can be with you leading the way to help remove that pain. And it goes just back to good old psychology. We will do more to avoid pain than to get pleasure. Think about that. That is just a huge statement, and it speaks so much about what's going on and our psychology. Before we go into rapid mode, just a few more questions. And this next question is not a fair question. I'll be the first to admit that. Here it is, though. Of the 5 steps, it's like asking you to pick between a favorite family member or a favorite child. Of the 5 steps, is there one that resonates more with you, or is there one that, as entrepreneurs, we should be paying more attention to than the others?
Nobody has ever asked me that question, Jeffrey, if I have a favorite step. And my answer is I actually do. I've never been asked this question, so I didn't even know this. But my favorite step is step 2. It's that create curiosity, because that opens the door for so many opportunities that you don't even know and they don't even know yet, because you're able to pique curiosity. And the thing about curiosity, getting good at it, I would say it's like building a muscle. You have to practice. Now, you can practice creating curiosity in every conversation that you have, whether it's with a family member, whether it's in a business situation, whether it's with an existing client. Like there's always opportunities to practice creating curiosity, but it opens the door for so many great things. And this also reminds me, I love this. In my dentist office, in the bathroom, there's this huge poster and it says, "You don't have to brush all your teeth, only the ones you want to keep." And I
I
think
love
about
that.
that around curiosity. Like you don't have to create curiosity with every person you come into contact with. only the ones you want to continue to have a conversation or a relationship or a client out of. That's it. So I think curiosity is my favorite step.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. And so, from the curiosity side, what would be a takeaway? So, before someone in the Default Nation, before they go after this episode into the next call or meeting or activity, if they could do one thing from the curiosity side, what would that be?
It really comes down to the first way to create curiosity is to think about how do you answer really common questions? And instead of saying, here's a common question, you get asked this all the time. How are you? Like we get asked that all the time. So it's all these opportunities to get playful and get curious and see if you can create curiosity with your answer to the question. Now, your answer, in order to create curiosity, really should only be a sentence or two. Anything more than that, you're word vomiting. And this is also what I call going into dog calling mode, which is a whole nother kind of topic around creating curiosity. But we want to give an answer that's one or two response, one or two sentence response. And it should be enough information for the person who, if it does create curiosity, it's a logical follow up and they'll have a follow up question to it. Okay. So this question, how are you? Instead of saying things like, fine, how are you? That doesn't create any curiosity. But if somebody said, hey, how are you? What could you say, one or two sentences that might allow them to go, what does that mean? Or tell me more about that. Or, so right now, if somebody said like, hey, Nikki, how are you? One thing I could say if I want to talk about this, right? Only give an answer of something you want them to ask you a question about potentially, is I might say, oh, I'm great. I just created a new training on compelling offers. Now, somebody might be like, oh, that's whatever. That's nice. But they might go, what does that mean, Nikki? Or who do you create trainings for? Or who's the training for? Now it opens the door for me to talk a little bit about a training I created, right? Versus, oh, I'm fine. How are you? I'm hoping they're going to ask me a question about my business. No, I'm going to plant the seed. Or if they say, like, how's business? I might say, oh, fantastic. We just celebrated 5 years for the podcast. And they go, what's your podcast about? What does that mean, 5 years? Like it opens the door to have a conversation. So think about your answers to your common questions and don't give common responses. Give something that allows the other person to go, what does that mean? Or tell me more about that. Or because when you start with your answer, you give them that answer to whatever, like, what does that mean? Tell me more about that. Then what happens a lot of times if you're talking to a potential client is the buying signals come into play.
Yeah, so interesting. Default Nation. My goodness, there is so much there. Nikki Lee be an episode in and of itself. And I have something to just admit and share with you. Yeah, that's my favorite step as well when I was going through everything. So birds of a feather flock together, I suppose. And
Thank
before we
you.
go into wrap up mode, Nikki, I know there are so many questions I have not yet had the chance to ask. Is there one question that I didn't ask, or a topic we haven't covered, or even a message that you'd like to get out to Default Nation, something that we haven't just yet covered and it really resonates with you?
Well, one thing we haven't talked about, because we've talked about creating curiosity, we talked about buying signals, but a lot of times people go, well, what if I don't have the opportunity to create curiosity, but I know I could help somebody. I know I could work with this business. I know they would benefit from what I offer, but I don't really know what to do. Don't ever be afraid to ask somebody the question. Ask the business, like something as simple as saying, have you ever thought about what it would be like if we were to work together? Or is there ever a time where you could see us working together on X, Y, and Z to serve your business? Because you might just be planting that first seed and they might go like, oh, I never really thought about it. And then pretty soon something happens and they go, oh, actually, yeah, we should work together. And you might end up finding you have a new client. So if you don't have that like natural opportunity to have the conversation and create curiosity and be on the lookout for the buying signals, do something to create it for yourself. But don't do it in the, hey, let me tell you all the reasons you should hire me. And here's how great I am. And here's all the things that you're doing wrong. No, ask them the question. Is there ever an opportunity where we might work together and I could help you with X, Y, and Z? And wait and get their answer before you go into like pitch sales mode.
And let me ask you this. I know I said we're going to wrap up mode. One more question before we go
Okay.
into wrap up mode. I appreciate it. Now, we find ourselves in some interesting times, but there's always interesting times. As we're recording this, tariff issues are in the news, but you can take out the word tariffs. and you can put in recession. You could put in some kind of geopolitical situation. You can fill in the blank. And right now, I know for many in the Deep Wealth Nation, we're hearing feedback. Yeah, Jeffrey, our prospective customers, they're just on hold right now. There's so much uncertainty in the marketplace. They are not buying anything. Even our existing customers are putting things on hold. So, in that kind of a situation, Nikki, what can we do with our best sales hat on, our best education hat on, our good intentions for our customers that we want to help who feel that uncertainty? Perhaps they even feel scared and things are on hold. How can we
Yeah.
help them get through that, not only for resuming existing purchases, but even new and additional purchases that they actually really do need? They just feel that they don't right now. Any tips or insights on that?
Well, one thing is I would challenge you to think about this in your business is sometimes we get into this mode of all or nothing, right? Like the client, I had this existing client and they're taking a step back, so I've lost them completely. But I would say, I would challenge you to go, is there a downsell? Is there something you might be able to still offer them that would still allow them to benefit with in some way from what it is that you deliver that maybe would be more economical for them if that's, I mean, if it's they've got no money, fine. Okay, we're probably going to have to go find another client for sure. But oftentimes I feel like people walk away too soon.
Mhm.
They don't think about, is there a downsell? And when you think, oh, well, I offer these $30,000, $50,000, $100,000 things, programs, whatever, and it's either you're in or you're out. Well, right now with where we are, sometimes you need something that gives people that, like, how can they dip their toe in the water? How can they do that first step with you? And that might be a downsell. And I have found this in my business too. And this has been wildly successful as soon as I figured this out, that sometimes I just need to give people that like first step, then they take the next step and the next step and the next step. And I have a very high repeat business. So a lot of times for me, it's if I can get somebody in the door and deliver at a very high level, something that they feel blown away by, they're ready for that next thing. They find the budget. They find a way to bring me in and do training for their team. They go, we can't afford not to do this with Nikki. But if I only start with the $10,000 offer and maybe they just need the $500 offer just to get started or whatever it is in your business, don't be afraid of having a downsell, especially right now.
And so it goes back to what you're saying, getting curious, not being blinded by it's an all or nothing, digging into their problems. And sure, maybe with the uncertainty, what I'm hearing you say, Jeffrey, on base, off base, okay, perhaps we can postpone some of these things. But hey, Nikki, when you're talking to me about A, B, C, and D, wow, here's what's going to happen if you don't do that. It's actually going to be more than what you would have been investing in. Is actually going to be a 10x or 2x more. Is that really what you want? Let's talk about this. So I love how you're saying get curious, break things up down to the ridiculous, a common sales practice that we all should be using. So I really hear you on that. And Deep Health Nation, some terrific takeaways for that. Okay, Nikki, that said, I promise, I've been saying it for a little while now. We're going into wrap up mode. It's a tradition here on the Deep Health Podcast. It's really my privilege and my honor to ask every guest the same question. So here's the question for you. When you think of the movie Back to the Future, you have that fabulous DeLorean car that can take you to any point in time. So here's the fun part. It's tomorrow morning. You look outside your window, and Nikki, not only is the DeLorean car curbside, the door is open, it's waiting for you to hop on in, which you do, and you're now going to go back to any point in time. Nikki, as a young child, a teenager, whatever point in time it would be, what are you telling your younger self in terms of life lessons, life wisdom? Hey, Nikki, do this, but don't do that. What would that sound like?
Well, I think the first thing I would say to myself is really lean into trusting your intuition. There have been times where I have ignored it because maybe I felt embarrassed to speak up. I was afraid of how people would see me or what they would say. But in the end, it bit me because if I had spoken up or if I had said something or if I had questioned something. So I would say to myself, first and foremost, just trust your intuition. It is strong and it will serve you. And then the other thing is, I think about I think this is a Buddha thing, like Buddhist thing of the root of all suffering is attachment. I would love to coach my younger self on how to let go and not be overly attached to outcomes, because I think that does cause a lot of suffering and certainly has caused a lot of suffering in my life. That if I had been willing to, I always say, instead of trying to hold on to things like you're grasping and you've got your fists clenched, that I can still experience life. I still can experience business and everything. But instead of clenching, having an open palm, still in the game, but not being attached to the outcome.
Yeah, that's such terrific advice. And I'm going to get a little woo woo here for Deep Wealth Nation. So often in our minds, we create what that outcome is and we put judgments on that. If you take a step back and you think of the universe, some people call it the universe, other people call it God, or whatever you'd like to call it. It's so much bigger than us, and the plans are grandiose. Why should we be the ones to limit that? And to your point, go with the flow and think big and see where it takes you and not to have that judgment. I really like that. Some terrific life advice, and both on the business and on the personal. And Nikki, that said, in addition to your podcast and your books, which we have in the show notes, a listener, they have a question. They want to speak with you. They want to bring you in to help them, their team. They want to get some coaching, want to go through one of your programs. Where would be the best place to reach you online?
Well, the best place, can I wrap it around a gift for your audience? Is that
Oh,
okay?
I love that. Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I've mentioned it a few times in the podcast itself about the importance of questions and asking really smart questions. And I have a training, it's called Seal the Deal, and it's questions that close sales. I would love to gift it to your audience. I normally charge for it, but I'm going to gift it to your audience because it will change the way you ask questions. It will either encourage you to keep asking some of the ones you're asking, or it'll give you a new way to ask a question so you get a better answer. Because, it's not about the answer, it's about asking the best question. That's where you're going to really make a difference. So you can get it by going to yoursalesmaven.com. That's my website /deep wealth. So this is for your Deep Wealth Nation.
Terrific. And Deep Wealth Nation, it doesn't get any easier. It's all in the show notes. It's a point and click. Please go there. And Nikki, thank you so much for that free resource. Pick up Nikki's books and her programs. You'll be the better for it. Well, Nikki, that said, congratulations. It's official. This is a wrap. And as we love to say here at Deep Wealth, may you continue to thrive and prosper while you remain healthy and safe. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So there you have it, Deep Wealth Nation. What did you think? So with all that said, and as we wrap it up, I have another question for you. Actually, it's more of a personal favor. Did you find this episode helpful? Have you found other episodes of the Deep Wealth Podcast empowering and a game changer for your journey? And if you said yes, and I really hope you did, I have a small but really meaningful way that you can actually help us out and keep these episodes coming to you. Are you ready for it? The dramatic pause. I'll just wait a moment. Drum roll, please. Subscribe. Please subscribe to the Deep Wealth Podcast on your favorite podcast channel. When you subscribe to the Deep Wealth Podcast, you're saving yourself time. Every episode automatically comes to you. And I want you to know that we meticulously craft every one of our episodes to have impactful strategies, stories, expert insights that are designed to help you grow your profits, increase the value of your business, and yes, even optimize your post-exit life and your life right now, whatever you want that to look like. And every time you subscribe and a fellow entrepreneur subscribes, it's a testament to how together, yes, we are changing the social fabric of society. One business owner at a time, one liquidity event at a time. So don't let the momentum stop here. Subscribe now on your favorite podcast channel. You'll never miss an episode. You'll be the first to hear from the top industry leaders, the innovators, the disruptors that are really changing and shaping the business world. And maybe you're commuting, maybe you're at the gym, maybe you're taking a well-deserved break that we spoke all about on this episode. The Deep Wealth Podcast, it's your reliable source for the next big idea that could literally revolutionize your business. So once again, please hit that subscribe button, stay connected, inspired, and ahead of the curve. And again, your next big breakthrough moment, it might just be one episode away. Maybe it was even this episode. So all that said, thank you so much for listening. And remember, your wealth isn't just about the money in the bank. It's about the depth of your journey and the impact that you're creating. So let's continue this journey together. And from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much for listening to this episode. And as we love to say here at Deep Wealth, may you continue to thrive and prosper while you remain healthy and safe. Thank you so much. God bless.